Okay, so we are ready to start. Well, first of all, welcome. I've already introduced myself to our panelists, but I'll introduce myself to the rest of the audience. My name is Katie Mayo. I work as an applied nutrition and R&D manager with a company called Nontraditional. So we sell farm processing equipment that takes crops like soybeans and corn and turns that into animal feed ingredients. And my job in particular is more of a supportive and technical role. So I educate about the different types of extrusion technologies. Specifically, we use high shear dry extrusion and how those ingredients are used in different animal diets. My background is in animal science, specifically pigs and dairy. And I did go to graduate school and got a master's degree in immunology. So I did take a little more non-linear career path by taking a job for an equipment company, more back in, based in animal nutrition. But I like the applied aspect of it and the communication aspect of it. So a little bit about coffee and careers. So Casey and I met a few years back now. I was pregnant with my now 3-year-old. So it's been a few years. And she had come to me about a real need for more mentoring and network building relationships in agriculture, specifically in animal science. As you'll soon find out as you're entering into your careers, it is a small and well-connected community. And we really need to do more to foster, new and incoming and emerging leaders in the animal science field. So Coffee and Careers was branched out from that idea of having a safe space for mentorship and fostering and building new relationships between industry and either current students or new and up and coming young professionals. And Coffee and Careers in particular has been focused on different topics of interest for that kind of group and a place for them to network and meet other people. So today we're going to have a 90-minute session total. The first hour is going to focus on kind of our panelist discussion. So we're going to talk more about nonlinear transitions into animal science and talk about some of these non-traditional technical roles. And then the last 30 minutes is going to be reserved for, we might do a breakout group and do some mentoring, small groups with mentors, and a more maybe like intimate networking, get to know you type session. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Casey and she can introduce today's speakers.
And just before we go on real quick, I do want to introduce and thank our sponsors. So IFF, Continental Search and NutriQuest have been great supporters with their staff and their time and also financial supporters of this program. And we couldn't do it without that or all of our volunteer committee. And I see a few of them joining. So like Katie Mayo, Amanda Mitten, and then Jim Smith is on our committee that will be attending as well. So we couldn't make this program possible if it wasn't for all the volunteers. And with that, thank the speakers for joining us. And our first one here is Rachel Endicott. And I really met Rachel through my network. So when you kind of, we've probably passed each other at scientific meetings and stuff and probably been in the same venues or conferences and stuff. But I met her through Jody Oline and using my network to find the right people. And she told me about her career background and what she does. And, I just hit really home of the great opportunities and different jobs. And I thought from extension to, co-managing publications and the Simmental Association to now she's her own consulting and, cattle rancher of all things. So I thought she had a really unique perspective to bring. And so thank you for coming, Rachel.
Yes, my pleasure.
We have two from Traverse Science. So I have been watching Jenny Morris, and we'll start out with Jenny in Traverse Science as it grows. This is, to me, a really interesting startup they've really created and kind of after my own heart and ambitions of bridging that gap, as I call it, between the allied industry and academia and production. And Jenny has a vast experience within her career in swine production. So yes, she's a pig lover as well, a little bit, but she's done some different stuff with the mash offs and then also at the University of Illinois. So brings that industry experience as well to her career and her choices. Then Stephen Fleming is the CEO and co-founder of Traverse Science. So he's a non-traditional animal science, as he would say. He studied neurology or neuroscientist from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Got to know him through Dr. Ryan Dilger, and really have enjoyed the watching Traverse Science and Stephen and his company grow, and really excited to have him on here. He's truly an entrepreneur and doing things differently. And so thank you all for being here. And now I'm going to turn it back to Katie to kind of lead the questions and discussions.
Yes, we thought we maybe just start off with some general questions. Just maybe first we can hear from each of you and a little bit more about your story. So Casey did a good job at introducing you, but if there's anything you want to add or share with the audience today, I think that'd be a good place to start. So does anyone want to go first for that? Maybe just give a little bit more than just kind of like your background credentials, maybe why you were drawn to the path that you've taken in your career.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. I'm pretty bad at like picking things I want to do and then actually doing them. So I didn't really choose this career path. I don't know if I would say it chose me either, but let's see. I didn't really know what to do after high school, for example. So I went to community college for a little while, and I mowed lawns during that time. That was probably my first entrepreneurship thing. I just went door to door and I'm like, hey, I'm the neighborhood kid. Can I mow your lawn? And learned a ton about lawn mowing. I thought I wanted to build a lawn mowing empire at one point, and I'm really glad I didn't go down like that entire route. And then I transferred to U of I Urbana-Champaign because that's where my then girlfriend, now wife, went. And along the way, I got interested in psychology, and basically the same thing at the end of high school happened at the end of undergrad. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I was like, I'll just keep going in this route. Interviewed at a bunch of grad schools, got rejected from pretty much all of them. Then interviewed at U of I again, kind of like got in the back door. Interviewed a bunch of professors. None of them wanted to bring me on because they didn't have money or it was a bad fit. Then I met Ryan Dilger, who Casey had mentioned, and so I joined his lab. And in that lab, I brought my psychology, neuroscience background to help them study early life nutrition and brain development. And so we were feeding piglets different types of infant formula. My job was like a glorified version of playing with pigs, trying to figure out how to test them for how their memory develops, and if nutrition can impact that. So then the same thing that happened in high school and undergrad happened in grad school, where I got towards the end, I'm like, I still don't really know what I want to do with this. But I thought what we were doing in the lab was really unique, and I convinced Ryan that we should do a startup. Came up with tons of terrible names for it, and then we agreed to like pay someone else to come up with a good name, and then Traverse Science was born. And I'll kind of wrap it up here, but like even when we started it, we've pivoted several times. So we don't even do now what we thought, we had started this company for. I mean, we spent like a year thinking about what we wanted to do and do it, and we don't even do those things anymore. So anyways, I took a really circuitous path to get to this point. It wasn't like, oh, I always wanted to do this thing. So I mean, it's kind of exciting in that way as well.
Thank you for sharing, Stephen. That was really fun to hear, especially a little bit into how you even got into the startup space. I think you're not alone with graduate students that kind of get to that last few years of their degree and they really start to think about their research and what is the next step. And myself included have had thoughts about, well, is there something here that could possibly impact industry, right, that I could take forward? So thank you so much for sharing.
I just didn't want to interview and update my CV. So I thought, this is easier. Let's just start a company.
Completely
I won't have
valid.
to interview again. All wrong, all incorrect.
Oh, man. I can go ahead and go next. So like all people that love animals, I thought that I wanted to be a veterinarian. And so as I was getting ready for veterinary school, I was like, oh, I need to have experience with lots of different types of animals, and started working at a nursery farm in North Carolina. And I mean, I don't know what to say other than the pigs just got me. I fell in love with them. I became extremely interested how all areas of swine production affect the animal, and realized that I wanted to learn more about it before going to veterinary school. So I knew I was moving back to Illinois, and that farmer told me that I should look into the mass shops. So I applied to the mass shops and worked in their R&D department for about 2.5 years. And while I was in their R&D department, worked alongside Dr. Mike Ellis's graduate students. And so was wrestling with the idea if veterinary school was correct or if I was really interested in research, and ultimately decided that research was where I wanted to go. So I applied to do a master's at the University of Illinois. Did that with Dr. Ellis, focused on all areas of swine production. And then as I was ending my master's, came across a lot of additional questions that I had in relation to pigs and the environment, nutrition, health, and then decided to stay and do a PhD. All of my PhD work focused on the pigs environment, but specifically all my dissertation work had to do with pig temperature preferences. So as I was nearing the end of my PhD work, Steve and I have a few mutual friends, and I was hearing about him and his startup company. Apparently, I like getting involved with things where like you see everything as the big picture. So as I was interested in like swine production as a whole, I was interested in like a startup as a whole, and worked alongside him a little bit at the end of my grad school, and then joined full-time as I wrapped up this summer my PhD at U of I.
Great. Thank you, Jenny, for sharing. I know Casey and I have similar journeys into animal science to yours, wanting to be around animals and do things with animals, but not really sure what that clear path is. And it's really interesting to hear, like you said, those pivotal moments that happen throughout your journey that I thought since I was like 10 that I would be a veterinarian, and that obviously wasn't the outcome, but in a very positive way, right? You have to take time to have those experiences and learn things about yourself, and really question why you want to do something. And it will hopefully take you down, the right road. So thank you so much for sharing, and, props to you coming out of academia, going right into a startup. I think that's really cool. Definitely more of a non-linear path coming out of academia. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
We had to force Jenny to take like 2 weeks off before joining, because she was doing like part-time with us for a while. And then, everyone loved her so much. We're like, we got to hire her full time. And then she did her dissertation. I was like, why don't you like at least take 2 weeks before like going totally into this? So, I mean, Jenny is, outstanding. So we're happy to have her.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, Rachel, that leaves you.
All right. Well, I grew up and also currently live in Southwest Montana on a family cow-calf operation. I currently partner with my mom and my uncle on the ranch. And I went to Montana State for my undergrad in animal science. When I started my bachelor's, I had no intention of going to get a master's degree. And then there was more to learn. I like the first day of my junior level nutrition and feeds and feeding class, I said, this is what I meant to do. I want to be a nutritionist. I want to do this stuff. Earlier, I'd sort of thought coming out of high school that maybe I wanted to do genetics, but really my interest in genetics kind of peaked at a Punnett Square. And so this will be ironic later. So just keep that in mind. So then I was like, I want to do nutrition. So then I worked for Dr. Jan Bowman in the nutrition lab, and she gave me some advice on different schools I should look at. And so I looked at quite a few and ended up going to New Mexico State University. I worked with Mark Peterson. And so we did lots of grazing cattle, cow-calf based nutrition work, really looking at nutrition reproduction interactions, which was super cool and interesting to me because it was doing work that could benefit cow-calf producers like my family. And so when I started my master's, had no intention of getting a PhD, but there's still more to learn. So I stayed at State and got my PhD. And then I came back home to Montana. I was the extension beef cattle specialist for Montana State University for a little over a decade. Half of that time I was off campus in Miles City at the USDA ARS research station there. And then I was on campus. So loved my time at both places. Loved doing extension work, being out in the state, meeting people who were just like me, who grew up just like me. That was probably a huge advantage to me, quite honestly, because there's not very many rancheries, PhDs in the world. And that gave me a foot in the door that, I mean, I was just privileged, right, that I had. And so advised Collegiate Stock Growers Group. They started that club, with me. And so that's kind of been a fun legacy to see those kids that were in that club now be young leaders in the state. It's really cool. And that's kind of a fun legacy to leave. But as you might know, in academia, if you're good at your job, they want you to do things that are couched under administration. And so I did that for a little while. I was a program leader. But when I'm being a program leader, that means I get to do less of what I wanted to do, which was work with people like my family and do extension work and outreach. And so I fought that for a while because it was what you're supposed to do, right? But I wasn't happy. And so I had lost my dad to cancer, and I needed to move home to the ranch. And so it's only an hour away, really, from Bozeman, but that time adds up. And so I needed to move home. And so the American Scimitar Association is located in Bozeman. And so I knew the folks there fairly well and worked with them. And so here's the ironic part of the Punnett, coming back to Punnett Square, is that I became, I ran their DNA department for them. So I know more about DNA and genetics now than maybe I ever wanted to. But and then I also worked on the pub side and still wanted more flexibility. So I went out on my own, started Gray Horse Consulting the 1st of January in 2021, and here we are. Haven't starved to death yet, so things are going pretty well. And I do a variety of things. I kind of say that my business is where cows and communication meet. And actually, pigs have kind of become quite a bit. I help out with the National Pork Board Speakers Bureau, and we partner with South Dakota State, where we have live virtual barn tours. So yeah, I think probably the theme here has been trust your gut, and probably do what's right for you, and don't worry about what convention tells you. So take chances.
No, I appreciate that. So yeah, definitely a very nonlinear path, right? And also
For sure.
being in academia and staying in academia, but then making that big transition into more industry, and now as an entrepreneur in your consulting business. So
sure. Yeah, and quite honestly, I have zero beef cattle consulting clients, and all of my consulting work is communications based, which is kind of fun because I've been able to put together all of my different skill sets that I have gathered. So the science part still matters because it helps me be more effective in my communication of those kind of scientific topics. But I also have that extension background, so I know I feel like I have a good capability of taking complex things and making them understandable for a broader audience.
No, I appreciate that. So Casey and I were talking offline, and that was one thing we really kind of wanted to center this discussion around, which is bridging that gap, right? There seems to be, okay, you get your education, then there's kind of, you can take XYZ path, right? You can stay in academia, continue to do research, maybe do extension work or work in admin, or become more on, be a traditional research scientist and professor and do some teaching and research. So I'd like to know a little bit more. We can start with you, Rachel. What were some of the challenges you had to face when you're transitioning into industry? Specifically through that happened mid-career for you or early on. What was that transition like? What were some of the challenges you faced? And how did you kind of find a way to bridge that gap?
So for me, probably the biggest change, I guess, going from a university to a nonprofit breed association was the presence of a board of directors. And so I had been very used to if we had something that science says this is the reason we should do that. This is good science. Let's do this. We did it. When you get into a nonprofit where you have breeders from all different parts of the country, some of them are really interested in being, making show cattle. Show pigs would be a similar kind of vein. And so you have this really diverse group, and sometimes they don't even want to know what the science is, much less use it. And so that was a big frustration to me. I probably never really got over that. But I would say that was the biggest change, was that I had gone from somewhere where the science was never really in question. And that was a huge difference for me. And yeah, that's just kind of the nature of it. But that was the biggest challenge for me with my particular shift to industry.
And you mentioned a little bit too on the ag communication side. So I think that's an important piece to also highlight. It's not just about the questions you ask, right? That you're doing good science or that you're doing relevant science, right? Something that's more applied, but it's also how do you present that data? How do you make that meaningful?
Absolutely.
So I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to that also, because I think that's a big part of what you do now.
Sure. Well, and I think I think we're not very good at times at meeting people where they are. And this is like a broader philosophy, right? But I think taking a step back, because sometimes, we're going to make decisions based on science, and the rest of the world probably makes decisions based on emotion. And so that's something that I have, seen clearly defined throughout my career in a variety of different ways. And so I think understanding people from, understanding what motivates them and about kind of how they came to be at the place that they're at, and making sure your message reaches them where they're at. Because if you talk over them, you're not going to do any good whatsoever, because people don't like feeling dumb. And so, trying to make sure that you meet people where they're at in a variety of different ways, I think is probably the key.
No, it's very important. They don't talk enough in a technical program about soft skills, and that really is in the job market why people hire you. So even if you don't go off and do your own thing, it's still about having that ability to make connections with the people that you need to. And that's not always going to be other scientists, right? A lot of times that's going to be people in industry, whether that's producers, or sales or marketing people at companies. So it really is critical, like you said, to not just build on that skill set as a scientist, but then to take that a step further and really focus on your soft skills and communication skills. I think that was the one hard lesson I learned coming out of graduate school, but luckily I was able to kind of develop those quickly. But I use that every day, right? So I'm constantly communicating with people that may not speak nutrition speak. And so it's really useful to be able to have that skill set. So then maybe I'll jump to you, Jenny, and kind of address the same question. I know, you're kind of just getting started out, but maybe you could talk a little bit to kind of the things you've learned since you've come on board with Traverse Science and coming out of academia, going into industry. What were some of the challenges that you faced?
Sure. I'll first start off by saying, since I went industry, academia, and then industry, it wasn't quite as hard of a transition for me. Also, while I was in graduate school, we were working very, very closely with the Mashoff. So creating tech bulletins, going and working on commercial farms, commercial research farms, and then just commercial farms in general. You quickly had to learn how to communicate with not only other scientists, but also like everyday laborers about why the research is important, why we needed to do things a certain way. So I will say that I have somewhat of an advantage in that regard. Obviously, there's always more to learn, always skills that you can hone in on. But coming to Traverse, I would say there's a different angle that I've had to start thinking about was like a sales aspect, like how to say, and here's the science and here's how it can benefit your business. So coming at it from that angle has been, it's not just this is why you should implement it within your barn. You already wanted this research, but oh, here's how we can help benefit you. Here's why it's worthwhile. Here's how this can increase your profits. That's been a learning curve.
No, thank you. And that's a good point too, right? You can't really know what you don't know, right? Until you get into a position and you start doing things that maybe you didn't do when you were in graduate school or, in a previous position. So, I think that's really important to just, come into things with an open mind, right? Be willing to here that would be kind of like if you're within like a bigger company, maybe that's called like cross training, right? So working with people outside of research and development or outside of, the nutrition space and learning from like the sales and marketing side. So that's great. You have great data, but how do we use this for XYZ purpose? Or how do we use this to leverage, in my company, how do we use this information? We do a lot of feeding trials. How do we take this information and leverage equipment sales from it? So no, you make a very good point that was probably the part too I wasn't the most prepared for, right? I was prepared to be able to talk about science and do science and help design trials, but I was a lot less prepared to, kind of fit into that sales and marketing side. So be that, I always call it sales adjacent, right? Because we're still in technical roles, but it's very important when you're coming in industry, you have to, contribute, but then also that communication aspect of it. How do you communicate it? What format do you put that in? Whether that's like you had mentioned technical bulletins, or something more formal like a presentation. Those are all things that are done, I think, across the board in industry. So as a student that's coming, getting ready to graduate and looking at, what could they do if they want to work into a technical role, really polish your communication skills as much as you can. And, you could do everything like what Jenny did too, and get some experience while you're in graduate school with actual industry. People go out and see the facilities, see the barns. I mean, I think that kind of experience is critical. I didn't work outside of the university when I was in graduate school, but as soon as I came into this position, that was the first thing I was doing was I was traveling and visiting the customer sites and learning, on the go. And so for me, that was really kind of my crash course into that. But there's a lot of different ways, as you mentioned, Jenny, that you can do that, right? So you can do that, before you go to graduate school or, interim, or even while you're in graduate school, sometimes there's opportunities there as well.
I'm really curious to hear Steven's thoughts on that transition. He obviously had a startup business mowing lawns, and he thought he was going to have like a massive company, and now he's got Traverse Science, and he's a boss, and he's an accountant, and he's a salesman, and he's a technical person. What were your struggles, or kind of walk us through some of that?
I was trying to figure out how to answer this question. I don't know. This sounds bad. It kind of sucked in some ways. The transition was really, really sudden. So, and a lot of the things were my own decision anyways. But I mean, when you go transition from PhD, I mean, I never appreciated this while in it, but in the PhD, success is really clear. You have classes you go to, you have trials to run, publications to write, data analyze. Like everything is, it's not to say there aren't challenges. It's absolutely challenging, but like there's a pretty clear roadmap, in my opinion, to what is a successful PhD. And there's definitely, maybe multiple types of successful PhDs. Then when I started this company, no one's telling me what to do. There is no roadmap for how to make this successful. There's, of course, mentors and coaching programs and things, but it's like information overload. There, when all doors are open, to me, it was paralyzing to figure out what I should do, how to make something successful. I mean, I think you hit on some of the head. Like, it felt silly. Like, if I landed a sale, which for the first year, maybe 2 years, most sales came from mentors. So like my partner, Ryan Dilger, people knew him and he said, hey, I just started this venture. Steven's leading it. Why don't you talk to him and he'll figure it out? And there were just really simple things where, how do I write a proposal? Like, what does a proposal mean? Everyone said sow all the time. And I'm like, pigs? No, it's a statement of work. I got to write a statement of work to do this. And then wait, we also need a master services agreement. And what is all this legalese about confidentiality and IP, and what is IP? So it's like you're not a lawyer. You probably don't have money or a ton of money to have a lawyer like spoon feed you and hold your hand on like how to successfully write a contract and negotiate it. I didn't even know what a purchase order was. So I'm like sending someone an invoice, like, we need a purchase order first. I'm like, where do I get those? Oh, they have to make it and send it to me so I can put the number on my invoice. So there's a ton of things like that, you know. On a social level, it was lonely for a little while. Like, I'm the only person doing the work. You know, you transition from, you're in a lab, you've got friends, grad school. Once you get to the end, you know, your friends start to curtail down, because if they were older than you, they graduated, moved on, or if they're younger than you, they're about to move on. You know, so I mean, there's some of those aspects of just administrative things that I didn't know how to do. I'm figuring out all myself. And that's not to say I didn't have, you know, my partner, you know, Ryan, helping me with these things, but you know, he's still a professor. You know, I'm really now full-time leading this. And then I think the biggest wake-up call was, if I don't succeed, I don't pay myself. There's no coasting. If I don't make a sale, there's no money coming in. If I don't deliver appropriately on that project, I'm gonna lose that project or that contract. So this whole like, if I want to make more money, it's completely up to me in terms of how to make that happen. There's definitely like freedom in a lot of that too. I mean, I'm giving a lot of like the bad things. Like, if I knew about a lot of these things, I almost feel like I shouldn't say these things, because if I was on this podcast, I would hear those and go like, that sounds like a total pain in the butt. I don't want to do it. I have a tendency to maybe jump into things and then figure them out later, which is a double-edged sword. You know, if I knew a lot of the things going into it, I would just say that's too much. I don't want to do that. And I would miss on some opportunities. And then something I think I'm still learning, and I think I don't know, it's funny. I feel like all throughout elementary school and high school and college, everyone talks about leadership and how to be a good leader. And maybe it's just my own experience. I feel like I was ill prepared to actually be a leader and know what that means, and the decisions you have to make. You know, it's like you can be a group leader in class or coursework or in a team, but I don't know, it just feels different when like pretty much every decision, I mean, it goes both ways. You can ask people to help you with things, and that's great. But anytime I reflect and go, I don't like this one thing about my business, there's no one to blame. There's no one to blame but me. So I got to kind of like buck up and go, okay, if I don't like that thing, I need to figure out what needs to change in order to improve that. And sometimes there's simple things like, I don't know, I want to make a change to the way we deliver our services. You know, that type of thing could come internal from the team as well. But there's a lot of responsibility on it too. And one tangible thing is having clear expectations. So if I were to write a report, and in my mind, I might think it's like 90% done. I go, hey, Jenny, can you just help me finish this out and then send it off? I might think like this should take like an hour, right? Because I'm almost done. But, and this is a fake situation, but Jenny might hear that and think that like, oh, this has a lot more work to be done. I'm going to spend a lot of time on it. So if I ask someone for help on something, you know, I'm not always entirely clear in that like, oh, I thought it was 90% and I only need these little things done. Whereas someone else might go, hey, this guy just asked me to do these things. I'm going to go all in and figure out every little detail. So helping the team understand if something is at like mile 1 of a marathon versus 25. I haven't appreciated some of those little differences. But what I think has been helpful is trying to find a mentor who has done this before. This could be like a scientific thing, a technical thing, a business thing, but trying to find others who have done what you're attempting to do, who can give you some feedback. And again, there too, it's really easy to get like intoxicated by advice and wanting more feedback from things. And when you ask someone for advice, you have to filter their advice because they don't know the situation you're in. They don't know the context. So they might tell you something to do and you go, oh, this person's been in the industry for 30 years. They want me to do this. Of course, I'm going to do what they say. But maybe when you asked for advice from them, you didn't tell them or they didn't appreciate the context that you're dealing with. So I don't want to ramble too much on this topic. What was, I think, hard for me, especially, is I came out of the university ecosystem, and most of the startups that come out of universities, there are many incubator programs that you can go through. But a lot of times when a startup comes out of a university, it's because they are, it's like tech transfer. They are commercializing something that was created in that lab. So maybe it's a new seed or something, or it's a new gene or a software or whatever it is. It's like a tangible thing that needs to be commercialized. We actually didn't have a tangible thing. We're a service-based company. What I thought we wanted to do was be a contract research organization, a CRO, and then I was giving a presentation and someone's like, I think you're a consultant. This isn't really like a tech startup. I felt kind of like annoyed and peeved by that comment, but then I was like, I guess you're right. This is consulting. And so I was in this area where there's a different roadmap for how to build a tech-based university startup. And they're typically pretty focused on like pitching to VCs, raising money from venture capital or angel investors. And I was like, I don't have a thing to invest in, maybe other than myself as a person. And I didn't really, I'm so glad I didn't pursue those. One, maybe I wouldn't be successful, but even if I had been successful earlier, I would have just been like, well, the VC people are telling me to do this thing. I should probably do that. So I needed to figure things out on my own, figure out what I did and didn't like. So it probably took me a year or two to figure out that like, this is a service-based company. We do consulting. I'm not raising money anywhere and everything is bootstrapped. So bootstrapped as in like, Ryan and I together put in like 7,000. He put more in than I did. I probably put like $2,000 in. And that's it. That was the only money that ever went into the company, except for anything we had got from consulting. And so it's in comparison to like getting angel investment or VC money, you're going to be hit with a ton of cash and you're going to have to build really quickly and hit these funding milestones. Whereas here, it's a much slower build. Like the only money you have is what you're willing to personally put in, and what you can get from projects or services you give. So, I mean, I had a measly salary for up until this year, basically. I mean, I paid myself like $20K the first year. I had a moment where there was like $80 in the company bank, so it was embarrassing. I had to email my accountant and say like, don't run payroll because I don't have any money and don't pay me. I got to tell my wife I'm not getting paid this month either. But thankfully some of those days are more behind and much more stable now, 3 to 4 years in than the first year. That's probably more than you asked for, but those were some of the hard things that I went through doing this.
I appreciate that. It sounds like it really, like you said, it was you and your partner, right? But you had this support team around you, right? You had your mentors and you had other people that you were talking to, whether that was colleagues. That's one thing too, that's a very important way if you're in school to realize like the people that you're in school with that are in your program or in adjoining labs that work on projects with you, they become your network after graduate school. And so you'll be surprised at the different ways that you interact, whether that's at a trade show, you just, see each other at each other company booths, or, something more intimate like what Stephen experienced, which is, okay, these are people giving you advice and helping you, along your startup journey. So kind of with that, I want to pivot a little bit because Stephen, I kind of mentioned leadership skills. So I'd like to maybe start off with Jenny on this one, but What leadership skills do you feel like are most important for you to develop? And you can speak maybe more towards both in industry, when you're starting in your career, but then also while you're in graduate school. And what do you think are the most important skills that you use currently in your role?
Sure. So I would say, first of all, learning about yourself and how you communicate with other people, how you measure success is really important. And then learning how other people communicate and measure success, and then meeting them where they're at has been life changing for how effective I am and how well I get along with other people, how easily we can get projects done. I'll give a quick example of that is I'll start off, if anyone knows the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram type 3. So it's like an achiever. We like to just get stuff done. So one time I was in the barn with some of my lab mates, and we were allotting pigs, and we had like 1,500 pigs to get through, and we were just quickly like getting stuff done. Things were going well. And I realized I was having fun. Like we were having a great time, doing awesome, making great time. And one of my lab mates came to me and he was like, "Are you mad?" And I'm like, "No, we're doing great. Like, look how awesome we're doing." And he's like, "Well, you haven't said anything this whole time." And I was like, "I've just been focused." And he's like, "Oh, well, I just thought you were mad and not talking to us." I'm like, "No, no, no." So I think like taking a step back and like realizing how I view like success and whatnot can be different for other people as well, and to just be aware of that when I'm working with different people, that's been monumental.
Effective communication, I think that's key, right? It's not just about learning how to be a good presenter and presenting data, but then how do you, like you said, how do you meet that person where you need to be in order to get something done? So no, that's a very good point. Anyone else from our panel want to jump in on that one?
Real quick, I think this is good for the audience because Steven put this over there for the audience. What industry are you currently in or trying to get into, and what kind of job? Feel free to type it in the chat. I think that's really good to kind of know. So there's an assignment for the audience to see if they're reading the chat.
I'm gonna grade everyone and if I connect with them on LinkedIn or not based on if they put an answer in the chat.
There you go. I love it.
I guess we could piggyback on Jenny's a little bit. Communication. Katie said this earlier. The soft skills are they're both the trickiest to develop and probably the most important. So when I have we're a team of 4 now, plus subcontractors, but like overall, since starting and growing it, like there have been probably up to 20 people who've been a part of the team at a given point, and I almost always looked for attitude, communication styles. I have to admit, I don't think I've read a single publication of someone on my team. I'm sorry. But I mean, I looked to see that they had some of those and that they could do those things. I skimmed some. I was more so looking for like, I don't know, when you see someone's resume or CV, it's like meaningless. How do you have no clue how that person's going to work with you, how they'll perform. And even in interviews, like I've also made bad hires too, where things were like seemed so great, and then once things started, it was like, this is now so different from what I expected. But like I personally have this bad habit, a really bad habit on the leadership side of, and that I would do this as a graduate student too. Sometimes I'll ask for help on something, and then I'll get frustrated if I'm not helped in the correct way. And I do purposely will say I need to get this done, and then I don't provide tons of details on how to do it because I'm curious, how is this person going to solve this on their own? Which is maybe also why I need to be lax if I'm like, well, why did you do it this way? Not this other. I didn't even tell them how they should do it. But I think that's actually okay. But what's bad is sometimes I'll get frustrated. I'll ask for help, and then a day or two passes, and it's just on my mind, and I just go and do the thing anyways. Which one kind of like undermines the person I asked help from, and then 2, that's not That is not effective delegation. If I ask someone to do it, I can support them and enable them in doing that. But then if I just like, why did I even ask if then I take my time away from something to just go do that thing anyways? So learning, like when Jenny said, meeting someone where they are, if I'm working with someone, trying to explain to them where I'm even at in the first place, and what I need from them to be successful in whatever that thing is.
Stephen, I just like, wow, you're in my mind. I think we've had some similar startup journeys.
Living rent free in your brain there.
Yeah.
I know we're talking about a lot of stuff in animal science and non-traditional technical roles. I think a lot of these things are just like all positions, all
Agreed.
And there's this tendency to be like, oh, what I do is this special thing and I have these unique challenges. They're probably not. There are very few
Nope.
original thoughts, and other people have figured out a lot of these things before, which is a good thing. It means someone out there can probably help.
Yeah, I go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Rachel.
Well, I was just going to piggyback on the idea about delegation, because when I was looking through these questions about, what leadership skills were the most difficult for you to develop, delegation is probably that one, which is probably why I own my own business. Perhaps I've yet to learn how to, right? So I just do it all myself anyway. But I think from a perspective of how can you develop those skills when you're, in school or just an early career, I think it's be as enthusiastic about being a member of a team as you are being a leader of a team. Because I think that will take you a long ways. And when you become a leader, don't be afraid and show your team that you're not scared to do any of the tasks that they have to do, right? You're not asking them to do something you wouldn't do. There's nothing beneath you. I think that was really critical for me, because I built a damn good DNA team at the American Cimental Association, and that was kind of how I structured it, and we were super successful. It was the best team I've ever worked with in any part of my career, and I think that that whole idea of trying to build people, whether you're you can lead as a member of a team too if you're not designated the leader as well.
I completely agree.
I love this point, and I was going to say leadership is not always about a title, and we get that mixed up.
You're dang right, we do.
Leading yourself, there's leading a team, and even as I'm the owner. I don't like to be the owner. I like to make all the decisions as a team. That creates some problems I found as well. But I like to function as a team, but you have to know, I think as a leader, if you grow in your career or if you're on a team, when you have to step up and lead. Because especially if you go to tech service, and we're looking at a lot of people here that are kind of tech service, right? Leaders, want to be leaders in the industry. And it's when to know to stand up with, as Rachel mentioned, the science, right? And you get in the industry, if you go that route, a lot of times people put the pennies down on a piece of paper and it doesn't match the science. And so sometimes you have to stop up and say, hey, we need to relook at this. We haven't dotted all of our I's and crossed our T's. And we need to go back to understand, is this the right approach? And some people, it's how you communicate that. So we talked about leadership communication, but I'm notorious for I wear my heart on the sleeve, but I don't always effectively communicate in the email in oral form that it's really, I mean the best, right? It's meant to be like, make sure that we do the right thing, and it comes across maybe as critiquing versus I'm just being that technical cautionary person to say, we really need to make sure that we have all the opinions and information before we, make a decision. And I just learned that as an example of this week, and I'm like, oh, I should have just waited, and maybe I should have checked the tone. And there's tools I use now to help me with my written communication, and I need to pull up Grammarly more, because it'll give me a happy face or angry face, depending on my tone. And so I think that goes into leadership. It doesn't matter, as Steven said, what role, but it's communication and leadership go hand in hand.
Oh, and while we're talking about Enneagrams, I'm an 8. So no, I'm not yelling. I'm just passionate. If you know anything about 8s.
Yeah, I will say, Casey, to your point, I really feel like, and I mean, we're judgy people, right? But I feel like you're judged in those moments of turmoil versus those moments of calm. So you're right. How you handle something, and that could be an email. Did you send something a little too premature, right? Should you have slept on that before you sent it? Or were you not, aggressive enough with your pitch so that you really feel passionate about that? So it's always a balancing act, and really the only way to learn is through doing. So there's not really any formal training other than on the job training. But to that point, I mean, I think it's important just to note, because this is really what Casey's out to do, is use that network of people. If there's something that you're like, I'm in this management role now, and I don't even know how to manage my own calendar. How do I manage a team of people? Like, let's reach out to people, that work in roles like that. Your mentors, and have some serious conversations, see like what tools they use, what worked for them, see, maybe look into some sort of formal education if you feel like that's going to be helpful. So there's definitely a lot you can do to continue to develop or even, learn more about some of those skill sets that you struggle with. And we all do. We all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses.
Sure.
And I was going to say, Katie, there hasn't been any questions from the audience. I'm looking at the boxes, but we had some. Thank you for posting what you're working on in the career. We have a poultry, we have a beef and dairy, and we have a microbiologist here on poultry vaccines. So pretty awesome that we have a variety of species and types of jobs. So one last question, I guess, because we're coming up on the hour, and before we break, I'll post it again, but it's up in the Q&A section, that the Zoom link, if you want to come over and have a informal coffee and we all turn our videos on, that's what that's for. But I'll let Katie ask one last question. So.
Okay, you're gonna put me on the spot here. Let's see here. Okay, I always like this kind of question. I totally threw this on here. This wasn't on the list, but if you could tell your younger self something, what would it be, right? So out of all the things you've learned at this point now in your life, what would you tell yourself, 10 years prior?
Be radically authentic. Trust your gut and take chances.
Annie's I see her wheels turning.
I'd say just don't worry. It all works out. I used to get so bogged down with, oh, this is what I should do. This is how I should do it. This is success. And it's like, no, just organically, everything does work out as long as you're proactive.
Yeah.
So
Don't
don't
get bogged
worry.
down in the shoulds for dang sure.
Yeah.
This one is like way more personal. I'm surprised I'm even bringing it up, but go get treated for ADHD earlier. I thought the level of procrastination and distraction and inability to make decisions was just normal. Some of it turns out the amount that I had was not normal. So more recently, I saw a psychiatrist and like, yeah, you definitely have moderate ADHD. Here's some medication. So I started taking it, and aside from some annoying dry mouth and lack of appetite, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I should have done this a long time ago. Should have done that probably as a child, probably should have done it. But I had developed a lot of like behavioral strategies and organizational skills to deal with those things. So
yeah. And I would say, I guess I'd tack onto that. Don't treat mental health issues as a weakness. In my industry, in the ranching world, any sort of if you go to therapy or anything like that, boy, you're not very tough. But brain chemicals can be off balance just like your pancreas. So you wouldn't tell somebody with diabetes to just toughen up. So if you're struggling, go get help.
Definitely.
It's an important point to make, because so I mean, specifically in agriculture, right? There's a very high
Absolutely.
percentage of people that struggle with different mental health ailments. So you're right. It's actually, I would say, a sign of strength, right? When you can recognize that in yourself and seek to better yourself because of it. But also it's that resiliency. You really do, especially you guys as entrepreneurs. I mean, you have to have a level of resiliency, right? You're always going to be throwing challenges and obstacles, and you're going to have really, really lows, but then you're going to have really, really highs, right? Those are some of the the best things about being an entrepreneur. But it's so important as you progress in your career, or as you're looking to start your career. It's totally okay. Like you said, even take a break. Like, I wish I would told myself that, because like Stephen had a great point. I literally defended Thursday, took Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I started in my new role. So, and also I was still editing my thesis at that point in time. So definitely don't do that either. I would not recommend that. Because I was working, 8-hour days, and then staying late in the evenings in the office to work on my thesis edits. So yeah, don't do that either. But yeah, just acknowledge when you need to step away and take a break, or do whatever your coping mechanism is. And don't be afraid to lean on others. I think you'd be surprised. Now it's a lot more, I feel like, talked about, but a lot of times people that nearest and dearest to you are going through similar things, or have been through similar things. And I think that just having that ability to recognize that in yourself is really great.
I was going to say, just last night, my mentor, Fred Madison, gave me a piece of advice to remind me of. And he said, live in the present, because you can't change the past and you don't know what tomorrow will be. And celebrate today's successes. I think we're always our worst critics. And I truly had to reflect to say, this is a success. Because as Stephen said, as an entrepreneur, as a consultant, it's a feast or famine situation, and you can let the negatives get you down, but you also need to reflect on where you were. Maybe for you on your journey, it was just 6 months ago. Maybe it was a week ago. What success did you have? Be grateful for that. Live in the present. Having a son who's now 7 years old, I just thought he was just a baby, and he reminded me, he goes, you're going to be a grandma before you know it. And I'm like, I'm not either. And because he's sitting there talking about his granddaughter and her friend, like these little girls, and they're freshmen in college. And I think that was the best thing for him to remind me of, is live for today and celebrate the successes you have.
Do we have any other questions pop up, Casey?
No, we haven't. So we got a couple minutes. Last minute thoughts from the speakers.
Well, as we go to the Zoom meeting later, I said a lot of these things are common no matter what, but I actually would be curious to hear from some of you, for someone who specifically does want to get into a technical role in animal science, traditional or not, are there things that they really should be doing? Maybe specific to that, beyond like the normal things everyone should do to get a job, or decide to like do their own thing.
Rachel, Jenny, last minute thoughts for the
final
audience?
thoughts. Well, I really enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun. It's always fun to get to visit with people from a different perspectives in our industry. It is small, and I would say that we briefly touched on it, but talking about the networks, any opportunity you have to meet people in other avenues, you have no idea where you might run into them later in your career.
That's great. So I didn't mess up this time on this webinar. I have the Zoom going. Everybody should click over in there, and I will be waiting on the Zoom, and that way, and you don't have to attend. The speakers can come if not, but it's just a chance to get to know you guys, network more, and have a coffee, because it's coffee and careers and animal science. So,
all right.
See you over there.
We'll see you in Zoom.
Jenny,
yes, thank
and
you to the
Rachel
speakers too.
and
It was really nice to meet you guys. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And I'm going to end it when I start seeing people come over. So looks like we're getting quite a bit people who are going to be able to join. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off.
Anybody else?